And welcome everyone to God's Views on Political News. So glad to have you here again this week. Just make sure that when you come in, you can comment on anything that you want, and you can ask questions. And make sure that you do that because we love that when you do it, right, Bill?
Absolutely, absolutely. How's Susan doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking. I know I usually ask you, and now
Yes, I
you're
know.
asking me.
I
That's
thought I would turn it around and ask how you were doing.
very kind of you. I'm
Yeah.
doing fine.
Well, good, good. Now, are you going to ask me how I'm doing?
No, I don't
No.
really care.
Okay. Well,
How are you doing, Bill?
no, I'm doing good. We are on vacation. We're in Virginia in
Oh,
the
nice.
Old Dominion. We're in Colonial Williamsburg for a few days. So we love history. So we did Jamestown, the Jamestown settlement yesterday, and that was fascinating. Just kind of a quick FYI, they have uncovered in the last, I don't know, decade or so, the remains of Bartholomew Gosnold, he was a governor of Jamestown briefly, but he was also the guy that named Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. And so it's just like history right up close and personal. So my
Nice.
family digs that kind of thing. So
Yeah, Beth was saying here, what a great tour for your kids. So that's really great. And
kids,
everybody,
nothing.
yeah.
The adults,
The big kid.
the big kid, right, right.
Well, that's very
So
cool. Hopefully, one day you get to go to Asheville, my hometown, and go tour the Biltmore House.
I've done it many times.
Well, take the kids. Did you do that?
Well, we did. We did. In fact, Beth and I, when we were married 30 years ago, um, we took our honeymoon in Brevard, North Carolina. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
I am.
And we
Nice.
took day trips to Asheville, Biltmore. Anyway, we love going to places where there's a lot of history. So tomorrow we're going to Williamsburg, and we're going to do that whole thing. Then Yorktown on Thursday.
Wow. A whole history tour. That's
Absolutely.
Really my husband is a history buff too. He loves that. He would fit right in with you guys.
Yeah. Well, it's 117 degrees probably about there, but we're going to do it. No, I'm exaggerating.
It's only 103, right?
No, it's in mid 90s. No joke. It was. I mean, we were all glistening yesterday.
Wow.
So anyway.
And Dawn is saying Savannah is full of history, so maybe you'll have to go to Savannah at some point.
Yeah, Savannah is a great place. Probably one of our favorite places is Charleston, South Carolina. So anyway, for whoever was wondering,
Yeah, whoever wants to know what Bill's opinion is on all that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, let's get started with what's in the news. And we can't ignore the obvious that's in the news. We know that Senator John McCain has passed away. Passed away on Saturday. And I just want to say up front before we start discussing it, I respected him for his service in the military. I have brothers who were in the military, veterans. My father was a veteran in the military. So I always have the utmost respect for those people who have served in the military. Mm-hmm. That being said, I also condolences to his family, and I hope they get through this trying time. And I know how hard it must be for them to have lost a loved one. He was 81 years old, lived a long life. Having said that, as a senator, I absolutely disagreed 100% typically with McCain's policies. And I kind of wanted to get into that today and talk about that. I know that the media is really not liking the adversarial, feeling between Donald Trump and Senator McCain. And it seems like that has been going on for a long time. I think, as we were talking a little bit before the show, the thumbs down, who could ever forget that thumbs down at 2:00 in the morning when the GOP was trying to repeal Obamacare. Mm-hmm. That was a blow to the GOP and to the nation.
Yeah, I mean, whatever his motivation was, and I have my suspicions, but that wasn't getting back at Trump. That got back at me. That got back at my family. We paid, as far as I'm concerned, we pay the repercussions for that particular vote. And so I'm like you, McCain served the country in the military, put his life at risk, spent time in a POW camp. He physically paid the price for that. And I have the utmost respect and admiration for any person who would serve the country in that capacity. But that doesn't mean I have to agree with them on everything that they say or do or think. And because I don't, and I didn't. And I mean, Jimmy Carter served in the military, you know. I disagree with Jimmy Carter about a lot of stuff, you know. George H.W. Bush was a pilot in World War II, you know. I disagreed with him on a lot of things. So, you know, and I'm married to a woman that sometimes I disagree with, you know. So we're allowed to respect someone's service, their life, what they chose. There's a lot of people that I don't particularly like personally, but I respect them because of they're constant, they're consistent in their views. Even though I vehemently disagree with them, I respect the fact that they take a position and they stick with it. They don't just, you know, ebb and flow by whichever way the wind is blowing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, in spite of the fact that we live in a culture that can't handle an opposing point of view, we're allowed to show someone respect and honor for certain aspects of their life and vehemently oppose them on others. And that would sum up my assessment of John McCain. You know, his family is suffering. They've lost someone that's dear to them. My heart goes out to them. I know what it's like to lose a father. You know, it's everything that it's something everyone goes through. And I respect the fact that the family's hurting and people need to give them their time and their space and, you know, respect enough that they can bury the man with dignity and not have to deal with the politics of everything. But you know, to be fair, he didn't become a saint overnight either, you know, so that's just kind of, that's just kind of where I'm at with it, you know?
Yeah, I know. And Dawn said, you know, she read a lot of controversial stuff on McCain's military record. I know a lot of veterans who adamantly did not like John McCain. Tyson said Senator McCain should have resigned during his illness. He wasn't able to serve his people. Not sure why this decision was made. And so some of the things we can look at and sort of comment on. I think the one thing that it's kind of stuck for me for the last couple of days, we're hearing a lot about Rick Davis. Rick Davis was an aide to John McCain, but he was so much more that I think that people have forgotten about. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk a little bit about John McCain today is because some of the things that happened are continuing to have a long-lasting impact after John McCain's death. You know, it's something that's going to go on. And let me tell you what I mean by that. As you know, when we talk about the Steele dossier, and I won't go into it, but it was, in general, the Steele dossier was a something that the Clinton campaign, the DNC, paid to have Fusion GPS to go out and get the dirt on Donald Trump and his campaign. And they came up with a Steele dossier written by Christopher Steele. Now, as you may recall, Senator John McCain sent his aide, Rick Davis, the same Rick Davis that was on TV reading the letter of John McCain yesterday. He sent Rick Davis to meet with a certain Russian billionaire, and I'll just call him Oleg because his name is too difficult to pronounce. During that time, and he got a copy of the Steele dossier. Rick Davis comes back, gives it to McCain. McCain runs it over to the FBI, probably with the hopes of, you know, this will finish Donald Trump off so he won't ever be president. I can't say that for sure, but I think that may have been part of it, because there was no question that John McCain and President Trump didn't have great love for each other.
I think it's pretty obvious they didn't like one another.
Yeah, they didn't like each other, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, you know. But the FBI already had the Steele dossier, so it really didn't matter what he did. Here's what really matters, and what no one's talking about, and they're not going to talk about, because right now CNN and MSNBC, they're doing a 24/7 tribute to John McCain as if he was the greatest hero and man that ever lived. And some people may find and see him that way. Others may not. But I think it's more to kind of push it in the face of Donald Trump, to be honest with you.
I do too.
I mean, and it's kind of obvious that it is. But
Well, considering, well, I mean, all you have to do is go back to 2008 and see what CNN was saying about John McCain when he was running against Barack Obama, to show that they really did not have warm fuzzies for him. They're using this to, to put it in, Trump's face, so to speak, rub his face in it, so to speak. That's Bill's take on it anyway.
Yeah.
Not taking anything away from the man's military service and public service.
Exactly. But I think there's things that people should know. And I think it's things that were kind of brought out, but we've forgotten about. And it's going to have and does have an impact on what's happening with President Trump. And this may explain some of the reasons why they didn't see eye to eye on things. In 2000 and in 2008, this Rick Davis was the campaign manager for John McCain. And as a campaign manager, what he did was he introduced John McCain almost to the T, to the same players that were introduced to to President Trump, I should say, during his campaign. He was introduced to Paul Manafort, this billionaire Oleg, this Russian billionaire, a Russian diplomat, and Vladimir Putin. So John McCain, in essence, could have warned President Trump about these people, but chose not to. And what I think stands out most, too, is that when he was introduced to Paul Manafort and Rick Davis, the aide and campaign manager to John McCain, were in a lobbying firm together and representing Ukraine. And so I guess what kind of gets me is why, when you look at this whole Russia investigation and with Mueller, has Mueller called in Rick Davis to ask him, you were connected with Manafort, you were working together with him in a lobbying firm. It was the Davis Manafort lobbying firm. What did you know? Did you commit fraud? I mean,
well, the more you find out how all of these different people are connected, even those that are coming after one another, it just kind of underscores the notion that politics is a dirty business.
Yeah.
And it's very rare for anyone to get involved with politics and not get some of the mud on you. I'm not trying to sound cynical, but I just feel that there are very few Mr. Smiths that go to Washington and don't fall into the trap of getting involved with all this behind the scenes skullduggery and everything. So, and also it, for me anyway, just accentuates that if we're out to get you, then we're going to find anything and everything, even while we're overlooking or blinking at others who we're not out to get, who have done this and worse. So doesn't give you a whole lot of confidence in many of those in power, doesn't give you a lot of confidence in the media and those who are calling the shots. So anyway, maybe that's why, part of why Donald Trump is the president today.
Yeah. And I think you have to ask yourself too, did Rick Davis get a pass in all of this because of his connection to John McCain?
Well, exactly. I mean, I think that's a legitimate question. It's a fair question, because if he was if he was on the same firm that Manafort was and connected to the same kind of people, why isn't he under investigation? Why aren't his offices being raided by the FBI? As was the case with Manafort. So it's like I think I've told you this before, but I keep going back to this in my mind. A few years back when we went to Washington, sat in the gallery of the Senate and watched the proceedings that particular day, and I remember McCain coming in specifically and walking up to I've already forgotten his name, Harry Reid. And, glad handing Harry Reid and slapping one another on the back. And it was just very, very obvious to me that these people get on television and they seemingly speak against one another, oppose one another, speak as if they're bitter enemies. But in those kinds of settings, they're all chums, they're all friends, and they socialize together, obviously. So I wouldn't be surprised if Rick Davis has done the same thing with the same people that Manafort did, and may very well get a free pass. Wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised at all.
Yeah, because Rick Gates, who was a partner with Manafort, look, they made a deal with him so that he would turn against Manafort, and yet, if it seemingly, if you were a Democrat, you're kind of safe. Nobody's going to touch you, or perhaps if you work for John McCain, nobody was going to touch you as well. And maybe because it looked like John McCain was trying to help the FBI, and so they gave Rick Davis a pass. I don't know. Now, Beth said, today's Mr. Smith goes to D.C., drink the Potomac water, and become swamp creatures. That's what happens today.
Well, if you drink that water, you would. That's for sure.
Yeah. And then Don said he was, when you were talking about John McCain, he was shaking the hand of his fellow Democrat. And I think one of the things that I've said is, and I kind of believe this, is that I know John McCain and Obama were very good friends when Obama was a senator, and so was McCain. And I think in some ways, John McCain throughout his whole career was more of a Democrat in my mind, and really voted for more Democrat policies than he did GOP policies. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it sure seemed that way. And I think in some ways, maybe he thought, well, if I stay a Republican, I can vote against the Republicans and do more, give more benefit to the Democrats than if I were on your side. I don't know that for sure.
I don't know. I do know that in some ways, his policy or his position on policy steered a little too left from my tastes. I think, and this is just an opinion, I think McCain wanted to be the guy that was viewed as the one willing to walk across the aisle and take a position, that he thought was the best, regardless of party lines and those kinds of things. And, okay, fine. I respect that. But I think I'm going to have to agree with Rush Limbaugh on this, in that typically when he or others like him would cross the aisle, that usually meant that people who were of more of a conservative mindset lost. Exactly. And so that feeds the idea that, this guy's more in line with Democrats than he is with Republicans. So, I know that he was typically, very supportive of the military and defense and being a strong American and those things. And I admire and respect and appreciate those things. But, there are these other social policies that, he was just a little too liberal for my politics.
Now, Susie said maybe now that McCain is gone, all that protection from Mueller will change. I kind of doubt that. I really think that Rick Davis is in the clear, and Mueller's not going to be talking to him. I think we do have other things, that are coming up that will be kind of an issue. I don't know if you've been hearing a lot about Lanny Davis. Now, Lanny Davis is a very good friend, lifelong friend of Hillary Clinton, and he also represented Cohen in his plea bargain with the FBI. And as you might remember, Cohen was the attorney for President Trump at one point, and Michael Cohen, and they raided his place and got millions of documents. And so Lanny Davis, part of the deal was that he had to plead guilty to campaign finance violations and other things. Tax fraud, I think, was another. And as it's turning out, Bill, Lanny Davis is coming out now to say, look, I was the anonymous source on CNN who told everybody all of this stuff about a infamous meeting in Trump Tower. But he's saying, Lanny Davis is saying, but President Trump was there in that meeting. And now he's saying, well, I'm kind of backtracking on what I said.
Well, what I understood was that he supposedly leaked this information to the media, and then when the media talks to him about it, he has no comment, even though he's the source of the information, and that's kind of what he's backing off of, that Cohen implicated Trump in some kind of collusion type thing. Initially, when Trump was coming out with the whole fake news thing, I thought it was a little over the top. But now it seems to be that they invent news, and I mean, we've always had yellow journalism, right, for a long time. There have always been the what was his name, King. Kane, the guy in the movie Citizen Kane.
Right.
I can't remember his first name. Beth Holland's on. She has all
She
knowledge
probably
of
does.
all movie trivia. She knows every answer. But anyway, he was his character, Orson Welles' character in that movie was inspired by William Randolph Hearst, who was a very powerful man who controlled a lot of the media in the day, and he shaped the mindset of Americans to move them in the direction he wanted them to go. It's always been around. It's just that today it's so obvious. It's so obvious that they're not objective. They're very much in the camp of certain people and push the agenda that way. So all of that is to say that, most media, anything they say at this point has to be taken with a grain of salt at the very least.
Well, and one thing that I think that has become very obvious to me, and, I don't have any proof of this, it's totally my opinion, but it seems to me that Rosebud, Marlene said.
Rosebud, yeah.
It seems to me that Lanny Davis did not act in the best interest of his client, Cohen, when he told him to plead guilty to campaign finance violations. Number one, a lot of people have said there may not have been any violation at all. And he had this guy plead guilty to it. And I think, just again, my opinion, that being a friend of the Clintons, he wanted some way to help them go after President Trump. And they needed Cohen, or it looked like they needed Cohen to be able to do that, because it was Cohen who said, a candidate for federal office directed me to pay the money, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that was a way to get a confession out of him that was going to implicate President Trump. And I think that if I were Cohen, I would start thinking to myself, geez, you know what? I think I may have been played. I think I may have had an attorney who was ineffective, who didn't tell me the right legal advice. And if I were Cohen, I would sue my attorney for malpractice, and I would go back to the courts and say, that part of the plea deal, I want reversed because I had ineffective counsel. That's what I would do.
Okay, I'm not a legal analyst, so help me out here. Mm-hmm. But isn't Michael Cohen an attorney?
Yes, he is.
Okay, all right. So let me get this straight.
Doesn't mean he's smart or a good attorney.
So he's an attorney who's passed the bar.
Yes.
State of New York.
Yes.
Who may have been encouraged to plead guilty to a crime that wasn't actually a crime.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood the scenario here.
Well, and I have to say that other people have said that the law school that Cohen went to, that if you want to make a joke about something, you make a joke about that law school because it is like one of the worst law schools ever. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I'm hearing.
Okay, well, okay, maybe. But the fact that he isn't an attorney and may have been duped into pleading guilty to something that is not even a crime, right. That is laughable. I'm sorry. Anyway.
Now, Darlene said it appears going after Trump is the ultimate goal lately. Meanwhile, more and more evidence of corrupt investigation, spying, and mole names came out. And then Dawn says, what's so funny is then he has an excuse.
Well, what was it that John Wayne, I think it was attributed to John Wayne. He said, you can't fix stupid. That seems pretty stupid to me. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Wow. It's just, it blows my mind how devious, corrupt, and just degenerate we are. I'm talking about mankind, and particularly those who see power as the ultimate goal. It's just incredible.
Well, it is incredible, and this is something too that I want to remind people of, and this goes back to again about when Darlene said we're going after Trump, and that's what that Mueller's doing. It's so obvious now, and here is why. And anybody out there can answer this question for me. Who's looking into this? Please do. I was reminded about an article back in April of 2018 that was written by the Federalist, website, and it was about in regards to an FEC lawsuit that was filed against the Hillary campaign and the DNC for illegally laundering $84 million during the 2016 election in violation of federal campaign finance law. And that they are claiming that the scheme was undertaken to violate the law, and there was a massive straw man contribution payment that was made through state parties to the DNC and then directly to the Clintons' campaign in violation of the federal campaign laws. Now, nobody, it hasn't been adjudicated, so there's no guilty or innocent of that or whatever. But isn't this exactly what we went after everybody else for? You know what Mueller is going after for Trump with Cohen? Isn't this exactly the same thing? Why isn't he investigating Hillary Clinton?
Well, I mean, that common sense isn't so common anymore. But common sense would say that if this looks suspicious over here and you're going to throw 18 months and millions of dollars into investigating them, then perhaps you should look at all these other people as well. So it becomes, to me, obvious there is an agenda here, and it's not really justice. It's a vendetta. It's the mob,
It is.
And so I'm going to say something, and I'm not saying this is a thus says the Lord. I'm not saying this is from God. This is just an observation. Okay. If Trump is God's man for this time, and for whatever that purpose that God has chosen him for, maybe he's fulfilled it. Maybe he is fulfilling. I'm just saying, if he is God's man for this time, then I'll make this observation. The Bible has a lot to say about those who in the last days, those nations who come against Jerusalem. He makes Jerusalem a cup of trembling, a cup of poison, really. And they're coming at Jerusalem, and they're giving Jerusalem a hard time. But in the end, their efforts to bring down Jerusalem, so to speak, bring them down. They're destroyed over it. All right. Now, I'm not comparing Trump to Jerusalem. All right. I'm just saying, if he's God's man for this hour, those that are coming at Trump are coming at God's purposes. I'm wondering if it's possible that they are so determined. Yeah, they're making his life hard right now. There's no doubt about it, but is it going to be their undoing? It just has that sense to me that they're just day and night trying to advance this agenda to bring the man down over things that, okay, maybe he did, where certain females are concerned or, what have you. But those things pale in comparison, as far as I'm concerned, to other things that other people have done that have put me and my family at risk. And I'm talking about national security issues here.
Right.
So it makes me wonder if they're so focused on that that's going to be their Waterloo. That's going to be what
They're
actually,
undoing.
yeah, but they're undoing. Thank you very much. I'm going to say something else that I don't know how much trouble I'm going to get into for this, but I do find it very interesting that John McCain died 9 years to the day that Ted Kennedy died, and of the same illness.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I do not believe in coincidences. And so you've got this lion of the Senate, Ted Kennedy, who died of this aggressive brain cancer. And 9 years to the day, you've got John McCain, someone that, has been held up as an icon of the Senate, dying of this, basically the same thing on the same day. In light of what we were talking about in McCain's involvement in the Steele dossier, if, and I want to underscore this, if he was coming against God's purposes, if he was being pushed to do this, to come against God's purposes, it ends up being your undoing. So whether that is the reality or not, I can't say right now. I'm just thinking out loud here. This is kind of interesting to me. There's these subtle ways that God allows things to happen, or he orchestrates, that are to make a point, grab our attention. And if nothing else, look how one man, in this particular case, John McCain, can make such a difference. In some ways, maybe good. In other ways, having a negative effect on the country. Because if he was intending to bring this information to the FBI to undo Trump, look what long-term ramifications it's having, even though they already had the documents. I understand that. But the intent, you understand what I'm trying to say here?
I do.
So when you're coming against God's purposes, and please hear me on this, I'm not equating Trump to anything holy, Jerusalem, Zion, Messiah. I'm not saying that. I'm saying whoever it is, if you're coming against someone who represents God's purposes and what he's trying to do, it will be your undoing. And again, that it all has that feel to me.
Yeah, it's definitely, like you said, I don't believe in coincidences either. It is a freaky type occurrence, if nothing else. But I believe that there are some ramifications to it. One of the things, too, that we're looking at, Don was saying, with about Obama, Obama had campaign finance violations, and he had to pay a fee of a penalty of $375,000. And we have other people, Bob Dole had a campaign finance violation. John Edwards, who you might recall, I believe actually used campaign money to pay off his mistress because he didn't want anybody to know that he had fathered a child with her during the time that his wife was dying of cancer.
Yeah.
And they indicted him, yet nothing happened to him. So, I mean, to me, it is very obvious, and to a lot of people, that Donald Trump is the target. And recently, Bill, as you know, the CFO of Donald Trump's organization was given immunity. Now, they say that was just for him to testify against Cohen, but was it really? We have a Manhattan district attorney who is saying now that he's going to be looking at things to find out, and maybe filing a state lawsuit to determine whether or not their money was used, let's say, from the Trump organization to pay off these women, when it illegally shouldn't have happened. And that has with some ramifications with it too, because let's say there's a state lawsuit that is filed eventually by this Manhattan district attorney, and let's say somebody is found guilty in the end, then that person, because it is a state violation, a state crime, a state ruling by a judge that there's a criminal action, there can be no pardons. So President Trump, let's say somebody in his family, Eric Trump, who's running the Trump organization, Donald Trump Jr., let's say they got indicted and they were found guilty of a crime. I doubt very seriously they would be, but I'm just using it as a hypothetical. Can't say it, but I'm trying to use it. Then he can't pardon them. Won't happen.
That maybe gets into a whole other issue. My personal opinion is, if someone is actually guilty of something, I don't think depending on the severity of the situation, I don't think they should be looking for, a pardon. I think, there are consequences for our actions. You and I have to pay them. Everybody else should have to as well. Unfortunately, we live in a world. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yep.
And that determines whether you're going to pay the price or not, in this life anyway. And that's another thing that I wanted to bring out, and it's kind of apples and oranges in relation to what you were talking about here. But in my mind, it's connected. And that is that, we go through life, we make our mark, we serve in the military, we're a senator, we're a president, we're an attorney, we're this. And at the end of the day, we all face the same destiny. We're all going to pass from this life. We're all going to be put in the ground and await, the resurrection, either to life or to eternal separation from God. And so we all stand equal at that point. And so when I think of someone like John McCain, hopefully he didn't go into eternity with this vendetta against someone, or this anger and this bitterness toward people or a particular person. And when Ted Kennedy had to face eternity, hopefully, there were things that he sought the Creator, about to make right. And so that's something that we don't need to get too far away from here. And all of the politics and all of the intrigue and all the he said, she said, the bottom line is we're all going to have to face the Creator one day. And for John McCain, that came Saturday. And it's just kind of a sobering thought.
It is, actually. And now Linda said, I'm convinced they know what they do. So glad that God is almighty. And Jonathan said that he thinks that God is using Trump to judge America. I would
agree with him on that.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. Maybe not for to expose things, and this goes to the heart of what I was saying a while ago, what God's purposes are. My purpose, your purpose, what we think he's doing might be one thing, and what he's actually doing might be something totally different. But I agree with that comment that he put someone that is such a black and white figure. And by that, I mean, you love him, you hate him. There's no in between. And he's exposing the deep division within the country. He is attracting all of this attack, these accusations, and it's plowing up all of this stuff that's been buried in Washington, in politics, that we thought was there. We knew it was bad, but we didn't really know just how bad it was. Right. And how far-reaching it was. Now we're getting a pretty good idea. And so all the nasty is coming to the surface. So I agree with that assessment.
Well, and it's pretty, again, it's pretty obvious that what is okay for one side is not okay for the other. That, that Donald Trump is totally being, in what we can see in the things that we mentioned here, being treated totally unfairly, when it comes to how he's being treated by Mueller or an investigation, and how, Obama, Bob Dole, John Edwards, other people, Hillary Clinton, the DNC, but with a totally different set of rules. As Don said, it's double standards. And it's, somebody was saying one time it's a two-tiered justice. No, it isn't two-tiered. It's just, there is justice over here for these people, and there's no justice over here right now for Donald Trump. It really isn't.
Well, I may not get many, win any friends by this next statement. Donald Trump is probably paying right now, for a lot of his indiscretions of the past.
Exactly. And I agree with that.
He's now paying the penalty for some of those things, and having to suffer through some of these things as the consequence of actions, choices that he has made. That is not to say that God can't use him or isn't. It's just to say that he's in the place that God put him. Okay, now you're going to pay for all these things that you did. Learn from it. And I'm praying for the man that he'll, he's kind of recommitting himself. We'll see. But at the same time, God is using him as a rod of correction.
Yeah.
He's using him as a rod of correction for this nation or maybe a better analogy would be a plow. He's coming and plowing up stuff that's been buried, that's been growing in this country for a long time, has rendered rotten fruit. And now we're just really seeing just how deep and how pervasive it is.
Yeah, I was saying the other day that basically, God is uncovering all of this in the swamp and everything else. And in every industry, all of this is coming out. And in the meantime, while he's doing that God is doing this around the world, he's also doing it to Donald Trump. He's doing it to you and me. He's
Absolutely.
Doing it to the guy down the street. None of us are immune to it, and we just get to see Donald Trump on the big screen because of his position as a president.
Yeah, well, and there's no doubt he's a target.
Yes.
He is a target, and since we're handing out respect to people for certain things they've done, even though we disagree with them on some other things, John McCain, I'm going to say that I have respect for a man who can take this kind of abuse and still get up in the morning and try to do his job. I have respect for that. I have admiration. I was just looking at something here on my Twitter feed just to kind of underscore the idea that the man is being targeted. Representative or Congressman Mark Meadows from your home state in North Carolina. He's part of the Freedom Caucus. Mm-hmm. He tweeted out last night, he says, "We have learned new information suggesting our suspicions are true. FBI, DOJ have previously leaked info to the press and then used those same press stories as a separate source to justify FISAs." So if that's not collusion, and if that is not an agenda and a vendetta, I don't know what it is. So obviously the whole Peter Strzok and all those guys that were involved with this stuff, they had it out for him. And boy, very few people could hold up under that kind of abuse and pressure.
Well, we have also Bruce Orr that is testifying today. And now remember, right, Bruce Orr, the FBI agent who's married to Nellie Orr, who worked for Fusion GPS, who, think about how much collusion that is right there. They get the Steele document from the Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele, and the FBI uses it, and they were all in contact with each other. It's mind-boggling, and Bruce Orr is testifying behind closed doors. Why? Get out there in public like everybody else. And why Bruce Orr is still at the FBI and still working there, I can't even explain that. He should be marched out like Peter Strzok was for everything that he's done. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
We'll see what comes out of it. I think they took Strzok behind closed doors initially and then, brought him out in front of the cameras. We'll see. And particularly since Bruce Orr, his last name Orr in Hebrew means light. So maybe God's getting ready to shine some light on this. I'm still waiting for the Lisa Page connection to come back in, because it seemed to me she was wanting to really kind of blow this thing open. She might be a lover scorned. Who knows?
Yeah, I know. Maybe her testimony is no longer needed as much because they did get information from the other people. But as Darlene said, Meadows is part of the committee that Bruce Orr is testifying before today. And I know that Mark Meadows was saying, we got a lot of questions that we want answered, and hopefully we'll get them today. But I mean, we're still, again, I know there are people out there who love Jeff Sessions. I was in the very beginning very supportive of Jeff Sessions, but Jeff Sessions, in my opinion, he needs to go. He's not working well with Donald Trump. I don't see him out there bringing on a special counsel. I see him saying, we're doing this investigation, when, someday, whenever, and nothing gets done. I know he's, as a DOJ, he's not going to sit there and tell us everything that he's doing, but you know what? You got to show us something that you're doing. The president's frustrated. Lindsey Graham said their relationship is just basically done between the two of them.
Well, if for no other reason, as an employer, if I had someone that I brought on to help me do what it was I was there to do, and we can't get along and how we're supposed to do this job, and I don't really have a lot of confidence in him, then yeah, I'm going to ask him to find something else to do. If for no other reason, that should be enough as far as I'm concerned. And I would say, if it were any other president in any other scenario, he'd have been gone a long time ago, and nobody would have thought any more about it. No one would have blinked an eye.
I know. And a lot of people say, well, but you can't get rid of Jeff Sessions until you've gotten rid of Rod Rosenstein. I kind of disagree with that. Rod Rosenstein is running the DOJ right now. Like it or not, Jeff Sessions attending, high school commencements and things of that nature. And Rod's out there just giving Mueller, here, you want to go investigate that? There you go. Here's my blessing. So the downside is, if you get rid of Sessions, the Democrats are going to try everything they can do not to get somebody else in there that would really go in there and do a great job. Marlene said he did bust a big kickback for ambulance services here in St. Pete in the paper yesterday. And he is doing some things, with I think pedophilia, getting the pedophiles off the streets and things of that nature. It's not that he's not doing anything, but I think the American public wants him focused on this Mueller investigation and this collusion that is with the Clinton campaign, the DNC, and everybody in the FBI and the DOJ, it appears. So that's what the American public want the focus to be on.
Well, as far as Sessions, and Beth Holland just put a comment up there that I've heard things along those lines. Why don't you read it and then I'll comment?
Yeah, she said, I've heard it theorized that Sessions is very quiet because he's doing some undercover stuff in the background, and that's why Trump is not really calling him out or firing him.
I've seen a lot of that online, and initially I thought, well, maybe that's possible. But at this point, it just seems to me that I don't know. That there's just there's not a working relationship there, or at least from everything we can see.
Yeah.
And I just don't see it being conducive to getting anything done, because for whatever reason, Sessions feels like his integrity or his convictions put him in a place where he had to recuse himself from all this. And I'm not going to argue that he should or shouldn't. It's just that it's kind of snowballed from there because he recused himself. He's totally hands off, and Rosenstein is running the show, as you said. Not a good thing.
Not a good thing. And as Marlene said, that's a Q conspiracy about Jeff Sessions, and it is. It's and I don't believe in Q, and for those that do, have at it. But it is true that it's always, well, trust the plan. Sessions is doing this and that and the other, and then also the same Q said that Mueller and Trump were working together to drain the swamp, and we can see that didn't turn out to be so accurate. But I think that America is wanting desperately to see something happen. They're wanting to see justice, and as I've talked about before, I keep praying to God every day that we get to see some justice on our side before the next life, if possible, and that's God's will. Because so far, it's been 2 years of watching the other side beat us, and I want to see something for us that's positive.
Well, and that's kind of why I brought up the whole Jerusalem analogy. Mm-hmm. Because those who love Jerusalem have been feeling this way for thousands of years.
Exactly.
When are we going to get to win? That kind of a thing, 1948. Yeah, good. Well, there's still Jerusalem. 1967, but then there's all the stuff that follows after it, and as far as Jerusalem goes, we don't win until the Messiah returns, Yeah. So it's kind of God's way of provoking us to say Maranatha, exactly. Looking, for his appearing. And that actually provoking us to live lives that are in such a way that when he does come, that he's going to recognize us and we're going to recognize him. So that's kind of some of my thoughts about the analogy. Where Trump is concerned, again, I'm not comparing him to anything anywhere close to that, other than to say God's purposes for now, for this nation, for Trump, for us as a people. When you're coming against that and working against that, you end up being undone by it. So there's always that hope that before this is all said and done, that there will be justice. Now, when justice comes down, there's probably elements of it you and I aren't going to like.
Yep, true. Very true.
But nevertheless, if we pray for justice, we'll just hope that it materializes, and like you, hopefully in our lifetime.
Yeah. Well, and I want to talk about another little topic too, that I think is a big thing that because we're so focused all the time on politics that we don't necessarily see what's kind of underlying and going on in our society. And I'm going to start with something that is in California again, because it represents, I think, the the disease, that's kind of going on in our country. And that is there's a school that is in Alameda Unified School District near San Francisco. And they have decided that they're going to have a new dress code, and it's going to be basically anything goes. So if you're coming to school,
that's an undress code.
An undress code. As long as you're a female and you have certain areas at top that aren't exposed, and you're a male that you have certain area down below the belt that's not exposed, you can do anything you want. You can wear tube tops, spaghetti straps. You can wear your underwear out of your pants. You can have clothes that are ripped off, whatever you want to do. The school is saying, we're no longer going to care what you wear to school. It's up to you and your parents what you want to wear. Now, what are your thoughts, Bill?
Where shall I begin? Well, when you and I were going to school, I remember we couldn't wear dungarees. We couldn't wear blue jeans. We had to wear certain kind of pants. We had to have a belt, shirts tucked in. Guys' hair couldn't touch the collar. I mean, coaches would come down the hall, and if your hair was touching your collar, you had a few days to get it cut. And if you didn't, you'd be in the coach's office getting your backside worn out with a wooden paddle. So I'm kind of about those days coming back, because if nothing else, it instilled respect for boundaries. All right. So what this school district in Alameda County is saying is, in my view, why don't we just start handing out drugs to people? They're going to do them anyway. Why don't we just let people, hire a prostitute? They're going to do it anyway. Why don't we let people just destroy themselves? They're going to do it anyway. Let's don't have any boundaries. And when it's, our kids and children particularly, I mean, this is already a heavily leaning toward, that's not proper English, we're leaning toward lawlessness already. This is just another sign of we don't care or we give up. I'm not sure which, but we're just going to let them do whatever they want to. I'm not going to tell my kids, you can do whatever you think is best.
Well, isn't it kind of like if you can't beat them, join them? Because isn't that what we're saying? I'm getting the red. Here's the white flag. I give up. We're just going to let you handle that.
Yeah, because it's hard work to bring discipline into a situation. As a parent, discipline and rules and boundaries and trying to teach your children right from wrong and show them the consequences for doing wrong, it's hard work.
Well,
you have to be on 24/7. It's hard work. And then you take that concept into the school, they want control of the kid's life. Interestingly, they want to control the kid's life in every other way.
Right.
And take that responsibility away from the parents, but then they will turn around and do something stupid.
I think we lost Bill for a second there. Hopefully he's going to come back. Okay, can you hear us now? We lost you for a second.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I must have froze up for just a moment there.
One of the things that I think you're right, the school wants your kids, and they've been trying to get your kids since the early 1900s. It's called progressivism, and that's what they've been trying to do. This is just one more progressive policy in the way I see it. And we know that in the fact that this came, you'd think, oh, okay, this is great. It gives control back to the parents, but it really doesn't. Where this came from, it's feminism. The NOW organization, the National Organization of Women, came up with this basically, and they're touting it across the country. Not only is California and Alameda using this dress code, but Illinois and Oregon are using it. So it is spreading out away from California and coming to you. And what they're saying is, the feminists say it's unfairly targeting females. And it's saying that girls should be responsible for not distracting the boys with their bare shoulders and bra straps. Now, I agree to the point that it's not a girl's responsibility to teach a boy how to behave himself and how to be responsible for his own behavior. But what's laughable is in the fact that we live in a society today that kind of is telling children, giving the message, and to adults in most instances, that it's always somebody else's fault. It's not your responsibility. It's not your fault. So
Right.
Why are we now doing this?
Well, I agree that a young man should have to control himself. His hormones are raging at that age. I get it. I've got a 15-year-old. I understand how this works. I was 15 at one time. But you know what kept me in check was knowing that if I cross a line, there are going to be consequences.
Exactly.
There are going to be consequences at school. There are going to be consequences at home. And depending on how bad I wanted to be, there may be consequences in court or on all those kinds of things. I never went and did anything like that, by the way. I'm just saying I understood there were going to be consequences. Most kids today have no idea of what consequences are. And this reinforces that. So while I certainly believe that a young man has the responsibility to control himself, to control his thoughts if he's a believer, not just what he does, but what he thinks. because how you think is eventually going to be what you do. But I also think that it's a parent's responsibility to tell their daughter, you're not going out in public that way.
Yeah.
Regardless of what the young man may think or do, you're not going out in public dressed that way, because it is not becoming a young woman to do so.
Right. And I don't want to see a boy with his pants down below, his waistline.
No, that makes me want to slap him.
So, I mean, it kind of goes with, wait, now Dawn said, have you ever seen the clothes that they sell for little girls? They sell promiscuity at a very early age, and they do. They sexualize your children.
My wife just recently tried to find a swimsuit for our 12-year-old daughter.
Jeez, wow.
And so the bottom line is she wears shorts and a T-shirt because she's not wearing that. She's not going to wear those kinds of things.
And, I wanted to say, too, an even more serious issue. This was something that happened in Washington, and it tells me that we have a real problem that we better start looking at. There was a 6'6" boy in Washington who basically was beaten up by a pack of 7 children that were approximately his age. So we're talking about 6 and 7-year-olds. This little boy has autism, and he stood up for another child that these kids were beating up on. He told the kids to stop. Now, the fact that you'd have to tell a group of 6 and 7-year-olds stop beating up on somebody is crazy in and of itself. But what they did was, when this boy told him to stop, allegedly, they broke his arm, they lacerated his eye, he has a concussion and numerous cuts and bruises, and he was hospitalized because of it. They hit him with sticks, rocks, and rubbed sawdust in his eyes. We have a problem as a society that we need to start looking at when you have 6 and 7-year-olds that are this violent. It's craziness. Your thoughts?
Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
But also, in the back of my mind is what I just said a moment ago. Kids will do things because it's in their heart to do them, and especially when they realize there won't be any consequences.
Yeah.
So I can't say with all certainty, but I would be willing to say that 90% of the kids that participated in that probably don't suffer consequence at home. And so they translate that lack of consequence to the world, and then they do things and they end up getting in trouble. Now, hopefully these kids are going to be in trouble, and hopefully their parents are going to be in hot water.
Yeah, I hope so. If they have parents. See, that's another question.
That's true too.
We're assuming that we have a 2-parent family. There was also another case in California, and I was really shocked to see this was from California. There was a student up in Northern California, 17-year-old female student, who walked over to this a boy in class, grabbed a MAGA hat off of his head, and slapped the teacher when the teacher tried to stop her from, this is all allegations too, when the teacher tried to stop her from, disrupting the class and doing that. And right now she's facing 2 charges of battery. Again, I was shocked that California had charged her with a crime.
Northern California.
Well, that's true. And she said she wanted to make a political statement that it was a racist and hateful symbol. And she said she wanted to wake people up. My thoughts were, somebody better wake these kids up that think that it's appropriate to go ahead and do whatever you feel like doing because you think it's inappropriate for somebody else to do something. Her father said he was dismayed at seeing how she reacted, but
like you said, people have an attitude that it's always someone else's fault. I can't control my actions or my attitudes or my thoughts because of somebody else. It's ridiculous. That's no boundaries. That's, what? The best of parents can have a child that will go out and do something stupid. God had children from the very get-go. They went out and did stuff that was stupid. I get that. But God demonstrated to us as parents, here's what happens when your child goes out and does something stupid. You allow them to suffer the consequences. You show them that I can't make you do the right thing, but I can show you here's what happens when you don't do the right thing.
Absolutely. And I think, again, politics are very important, but we have to start focusing on things also in our society that are happening that shows us we're in trouble in a lot of respects.
Well, the politics of the day is a reflection of society today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to thank everybody for being here. We are so out of time. As always, the show goes really fast. Thank you so much for sharing this with your family and friends as well. We appreciate it. And until next week, God bless you. Take care.